Hey, what day is it? It's July 1st, 2024. So, what does that mean? It's this day in history. We have some pretty interesting stuff for July 1st. Um, so, let's just get into it. The birthdays. We're starting with a birthday, 1818. Ignaz Semmelweis was a Hungarian physician. That's all I know. Apparently, he must have invented something. I don't know, but Hungarian physician Ignaz Semmelweis was born in 1818. 98 years later, in 1916, Olivia de Havilland, she was an American actress. She was born on this day in 1916. On this day in 1934, Sidney Pollack, he was an American director, producer, actor. He was born this day. Um, it is also the birthday of Lady Diana. In 1961, Diana, Princess of Wales, she was born on this day, and unfortunately, she died in a tragic car crash. What was it, 97? I think it was late 90s. It was stupid. It should have been prevented. It should never have happened. But of all the royals, I always thought she was a class act publicly. Yeah, you find out privately, she had her affairs just like Prince Charles had his affairs. So in the end, neither one of them really could hold a moral high ground, but she was an excellent mother. She was a tremendous mother and a wonderful humanitarian. She loved those boys, William and Harry. She would plead with the media to leave them alone. I mean, she was a good mom, and she, for all her faults, she was a good person. I mean, like, what they say about the road to hell, it's always paved with good intentions. And I'm not saying she's in hell, and I hope for her soul she's not. But she's not perfect. Neither am I. I'm not judging her lifestyle at all. Like I said, she had a very outwardly positive image, but those who knew her best, or knew her intimately, knew that she had her own skeletons too, as we all do. So today is Lady Di's birthday. She would have been 63, if my math is right. She's born in 61. It's 2024. Yeah, she would have been 63 today. So, happy birthday to Missy Elliott. She was born on this day in 1971. She's an American rapper. She's a music producer. I can't speak. So happy birthday to her. That concludes the birthdays for today, July 1st. I'm going to give a shout out to Deborah. So, I worked with someone who had two daughters. We had a relationship. Loved those girls. They were Deborah's birthday is today. She's the oldest daughter. So happy birthday, Deborah. I love you. She used to oh, that kid would try my patience, but it's all right. She was a good kid. Kids are kids. Any rate, moving right along. Let's get back to happy birthday, sweetheart. I love you. Hope you have a blessed day today. Okay. So back to history. This day in history. This day, July 1st, 1535. Sir Thomas More went on trial for treason. And it's because he refused to accept Henry VIII as the head of the Church of England. Henry VIII was not a nice guy. He was not a good king. He was a bully. He was a tyrant. He was a dictator. This is the guy who had his wife, the Queen, executed. He trumped up charges of treason against her. I mean, The official record is that she engaged in treason, and that she had what damned her were that she had an affair. And well, you know what? He was having an affair too. In fact, he wanted to divorce her, but the church wouldn't let him divorce. So he had her brought up on treason charges, had her executed, so that he could go marry somebody else. And the man went through like 8 wives or something like that. But so he also broke away from the Catholic faith, and then he had started the Church of England, which was kind of an Anglican. I mean, it's almost Catholic, but not quite. You know, it's the quasi-Catholic, the semi-Catholic, the you know, the 1-calorie Catholic, not Catholic enough. You know, so that's I'm trying to do Dr. Evil from Austin Powers, and I failed miserably. But at any rate, so he establishes the Church of England, but he establishes himself as the head of it. And you fast forward to the creation of our nation. That was one thing that we didn't want to have, is we didn't want to have a Church of America. So when you hear these things about separation of church and state, that's what that was about. Had nothing to do with whether or not the 10 Commandments can be in a school. Had nothing to do with whether the 10 Commandments can be in a courthouse. It had everything to do with the fact that the American colonies did not want to have an overbearing, power-driven church entity to inject itself into state politics. The Church of England did that in England. It would often interject itself into the king's affairs a lot, and they didn't. But on the flip side, the king did that too, right? So he would interject himself onto church affairs, and they didn't like that. So Thomas Jefferson, it's not, okay, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not in the Constitution. Separation of church and state, you're wrong if you think it's in the Constitution. It's not, right? It was never in the Constitution. It was a doctrine. It was a Jeffersonian doctrine. President Jefferson essentially drafted it as an executive order. And it's just one of those things where it just kind of stuck, right? So, what happens after 200 plus years? Well, you get to assume that it's part of the doctrine when it's not. And that's what it comes down to. Is there's a lot of misinformation. It's like a lot of people will say democracy, democracy, democracy. We even have politicians that talk about our democracy. We're not a democracy. We never were. We were a constitutional republic, and there's a difference, and I've explained this in other videos. But, why are we a republic and not a democracy? Because of people like Henry VIII. So what he did is because Sir Thomas More refused to acknowledge the king as the head of the church, that king's ego wouldn't let it go, and had him, he was brought up on treason charges. Now, I don't know what ever happened to that, but it's a safe bet that during Henry VIII's reign, if you were brought up on treason charges, you were almost always summarily executed, because that's just kind of how he was. Not a good king. Not a good king at all. I'm not a fan of the guy at all. So moving right along, the year is 1690, and it's another issue with English kings. It's the Battle of the Boyne. King William III of England, he defeated the former King James II. Now, if I'm piecing this together right, William wrestles the throne from James. James comes back in an attempt to reclaim his throne and is soundly defeated in this battle. So, William III defeats James II in the Battle of Boyne. So we go Civil War, 1863. Today is the day where the Battle of Gettysburg actually began. I've been to Gettysburg, or rather, I drove through it at night, so I didn't get to see anything. But I was kind of giddy seeing all the signs. You're in Gettysburg, and I was like, oh, But so it was a very important and very crucial battle in the Civil War. It really was the beginning of the end for the South. It was a battle that went, I think it went about 3 days. Massive loss of life on both sides. As a result, President Lincoln had delivered a Gettysburg address that would be the 7 years ago address speech that he had, where he had it written out, and then finally he just kind of tucked it away, and he spoke from the heart, and that was the Gettysburg Address, where he consecrated the hallowed ground that all those men, both Union and Confederate, like he saw them all as Americans, and it was an unfortunate, bloody conflict that, in his view, didn't need to happen, and he wanted it to come to an end, but it's still 1863, and obviously the war went in for another 2 years, but it was the beginning of the end. It was where Lee's forces were whittled down considerably because Grant was the new guy, and he wasn't backing down like the other generals did. Hindsight's always 20/20, I think if Lincoln had any idea of what kind of a person Ulysses Grant was, he probably would have put him in charge of the whole operation, and this war would have been concluded probably a lot sooner. Grant understood one thing, right? Union troops outnumbered the Confederate troops 4-1. It was meat to the grinder. It became a war of attrition, and that's how the Union won, is because they just kept throwing guys into the mix, and knowing that he was going to take heavy losses on his end, but he knew that he was going to whittle Lee's losses down to nothing. And Lee started the war with like 188,000, I think. That's how big his army was. It was whittled down to just over 23,000 at Appomattox when he surrendered. So, I mean, it's a brutal tactic because you're just throwing meat to the grinder, but I mean, it worked. So we fast forward to 1903. 1903, it's in France. The very first Tour de France began, and that would become cycling's most prestigious and difficult event. Like, it's the pinnacle of bicycling. So, like, it's the I don't know, the Wimbledon of tennis, I suppose, the Super Bowl of football. It's to that level for cycling. So Tour de France is like the Super Bowl of cycling, and so it began in 1903, and quickly became that sport's most prestigious event and difficult event. It is very difficult. 1963. The United States Postal Service institutes the Zone Improvement Plan Code. Give you a moment to figure that out. Zone Improvement Plan Code. Zip codes. For years I'd wondered what zip meant, and now I know. And, learn something new every day. So, and that was implemented on this day in 1963. 5 years later, on this day in 1968, the United States, the USSR, the United Kingdom, and 59 other states, they sign a nuclear non-proliferation treaty in an attempt to halt the spread of nuclear weapons. And, well, how did that work out with the arms race in the 80s? Now, at any rate, it was meant to keep more nukes getting into the fray. basically the signatures were pledging that they would not utilize um, nuclear options as a first resort. So that, I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, it's we in the United States, we tried to limit who had um, capabilities, or who had access to nuclear weapons, and for good reason, because, like, like, there's a lot of enemies of our Western thinking, and there are a lot of enemies that would choose to use a nuke right off the bat. Now you might say, Bill, where does the United States get off thinking that they have the right to tell another country they can't have a nuke when they used a nuke themselves? You're right. We used a nuke to save lives. As harsh as that sounds, the 1 or 2 million that died as a result of the 2 nuclear bombs, the atom bombs, and the aftermath of that, paled into comparison as to how many more millions would have died had we blockaded Japan and bombed out the rice paddies and starved the whole country out, or we put boots to the ground and would have cost us 1 million more soldiers' lives to pacify the homeland, because those guys were so brainwashed that they would have fought to the very last man, woman, and child. So, as harsh as it sounds, dropping 2 nuclear bombs on a country saved that country, because the powers that be, not Hirohito, but his wackadoo generals, Tojo and the like, they would have rather seen a complete genocide of their people than to ever surrender. So how can we have the moral high ground to say that we can have nukes but you can't? Because let's fast forward to Korea. The Korean War, MacArthur was running his mouth off telling the Chinese and the North Koreans that they didn't back off, we were going to drop a nuke on them. Truman back home was like, no, we're not. That was never on the table. We've never discussed the use of a nuclear option. It was not even in consideration whatsoever. You need to stop, putting words in my mouth. It eventually, that's one of the reasons why MacArthur got fired from Truman, because of that, is because the conflicting stuff that was being sent. But we were never going to drop a nuke in Korea. We were never going to drop a nuke in Vietnam. We were never going to drop a nuke in Iraq, or Kuwait, or anytime we've ever had a Grenada, Panama, Beirut, whatever. I mean, like, but we do have some enemies that would not hesitate. Iran, for instance, if Iran could get its hands on nukes, oh, they would use it in a heartbeat. I am confident that they would use it in a heartbeat. And their only dilemma would be, well, who do we use it against? The United States or Israel? Which one do we want to target first? And that's why we set up the Atomic Energy Commission after World War I or World War II was concluded. That's why we had things like this treaty that was signed. It was to, keep everybody in check. So it was a good thing. We fast forward to 1979. Sony began selling the Walkman portable cassette player. I'm dating myself again. I had one of these too. All you kids out there, you have the luxury of having digital downloads. You have your MP3 players, you have your iPods, where everything is digital. Before that, the very first, MP3 player, or what you think of as your portable MP3 player, we had, it was about yay big, right? You took a cassette tape and you drop that cassette tape in there. And this is before the Walkmans, utilized CDs. That came later. But in 1979, it was the cassette tape. The cassette tape was what replaced the beta, or not beta, the 8-track tape. I'm dating myself again. Beta was the predecessor to VHS. VHS was the predecessor to Laserdisc. Laserdisc was the predecessor to DVD. DVD was the predecessor to Blu-ray, and now we're in digital. Well, now we're in the digital world. So, yeah, you're welcome. You just had your history in analog. 1997, Hong Kong. The rulership of Hong Kong reverts back over to Chinese authority. It reverted back to Chinese authority after 156 years of British rule. Hong Kong was a British colony. They released control of the colony back to the Chinese people, and that was in 1997. I remember that. 2002, the International Crime Court established to prosecute crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, etc., 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 etc. In 2002, this court began sittings. I didn't get clarification on what that meant, but I know that the International Court couldn't have been established in 2002, because then what were the Nuremberg trials back in 46, you know? So, in 2004, Marlon Brando, he was an American actor. He was most famous for playing Don Corleone in the Godfather movies. He was in Apocalypse Now. He'd done a lot of stuff. He was, he had a long career. He died at the age of 80 in 2004. So he'd have been 100 years old this year. Wow. So in 2020, NAFTA, which was the North American Free Trade Act of 1994, was replaced with USMCA, which is the US-Mexico Canada agreement. And basically it was the free trade agreement really wasn't good for the American economy. It built up the economies in other countries, because what it did is that it allowed companies to outsource to, basically send, we're going to close up our factories here in the United States because it costs too much to run them here. So we're going to go to either Canada or Mexico or wherever and start a factory up there where it's going to cost us a lot cheaper. So that's essentially what NAFTA did. The USMCA replaced that, where it basically it encouraged strong trade between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, but I think it also was trying to, I'm not sure, either reabsorb or curtail outsourcing. I'm not sure about that, but that happened in 2020. But today's featured event today is Canada Day, and so in 1867 the Dominion of Canada was established, and Canada Day, as our neighbors to the north know it, was established in 1982, where it was the flying of flags, it was the fireworks, the ticker tape parades, all that stuff, where they celebrate being Canada. They celebrate Canada as a nation being established, or as an identity being established. I don't know when it got its autonomy from Great Britain, but and it possibly was here in 1867. But 1867 is the Dominion of Canada is established. So, to my neighbors to the north up in Canada, happy Canada Day. I believe Canada Day is to our neighbors to the north like what the 4th of July is to us. It's our, it's really celebrated the nation of the birth of our nation. So, happy Canada Day to all you folks up there to the north. And this has been This Day in History, and I appreciate those who watch these videos. I know sometimes they run a little long, but I love history, and I love telling stories. So thank you. But have a great day. Be blessed. Take care. And we will do it again tomorrow for July 2nd. All right. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.